Hello YouTube, I'm Andrew Does Hair. You can find my work on Instagram at Andrew Does Hair. In this video today, I'd like to sort of breeze over the first, couple months of cosmetology school to point out how complicated hair actually is, or how not complicated it is. You see, it's my hope that somebody who doesn't cut hair might watch this video and go, hey, that's a little more complicated than I thought. But at the same time, I want somebody who does cut hair to watch this video and go, you really put that simply. That's not as complicated as I recall it being. You see, these are like kind of fundamentals that we learn in school, and we mostly put into practice most of the time throughout our day in the salon. But to be honest, most of us, myself included, sometimes we can go years without brushing up on the fundamentals. So I'm going to just do like a very surface layer scrape of some haircutting fundamentals, some principles and basics about just what a haircut is, because it is not lengths and numbers and buzzwords. So to begin, I'm going to ruin a mannequin head. I'm going to cut just a blunt line across the back of this head. Now, don't judge it too harshly. This is not a haircut. This is a demonstration to show a principle, an idea. The idea is this. If I were to cut a blunt straight line anywhere on a haircut, that blunt straight line is only going to be blunt if it's sitting exactly how it was sitting when it was cut. If I were to take that hair that sits bluntly when it lays downward, if I were to take it and pull it out, we would see that it creates an angle. There's almost maybe a 45-degree pitch coming off of the head there. And so while we were creating a blunt line, at the same time we were kind of creating an angle. And if I were to take that same hair and lift it up even higher, the angle would change. So I guess the big main point here, the starting point of hair cutting is, if you cut a blunt line, it's only blunt if it sits exactly where it was sitting when it was cut. If you think about the way clippers and scissors work, they're pretty much designed to cut blunt lines, aside from maybe some like texturizing tricks or whatever. But for the most part, they cut blunt straight lines. But not every haircut is blunt and straight. It'll only be blunt if it's sitting exactly where it was sitting while it was cut blunt. Here's how that worked. If I take all this hair and I cut it to a blunt line, like I just did in that little video clip, pull it around the back of the head and chop. These hairs on top have to travel a really long way to come all the way down to the bottom there. So they end up very long. These hairs further down the head didn't have to travel quite as far to that same point to be cut, and so they end up much shorter. You see, short, long. So the further you pull the hair from where it grows to where it's cut, the longer it becomes. And because of this, even though we have a blunt line here at the back of the head, when everything comes to exactly that point, anywhere else we move the hair, whether sideways or out, if we pull that hair straight out, we don't have that blunt line anymore. We have a bit of an angle sticking out here. And the further we move it from where it was cut, the less blunt that line becomes. This is going to be like, there's nothing blunt about that. So this little bit that we saw here, the fact that if I cut a blunt line somewhere, the further I move the hair from that cut, the less blunt it is. And the further the hair came to be cut at that point, the longer it is. That is like hair cutting in a nutshell. Almost everything we do with almost every haircut is built around that. You see, we don't just pull the hair to where we want it to sit and then cut it. What hair cutting really is, when somebody's good at hair cutting, is they're able to take what we just did and reverse engineer it and begin at any point of the equation to come out on any other point of the equation. For example, here we brought all the hair down to the straight down and we cut it. And then afterward we pulled it out and we found that it created these different angles. What you learn when you learn how to cut hair is how to reverse engineer that and say, hey, if you pull it out at this angle and cut it at this angle, this is how it will fall. This is how heavy it will fall. And what we're doing is deciding where and how the hair is going to fall down and engineering these angles. Pulling, when you get a haircut, you see them pull your hair up and out. That's not just so it can like get off your head for them to cut it. It's because if you pull the hair up and cut it to a blunt line, when it falls down, it's going to be the furthest thing from blunt. If you pull the hair straight out to the side and cut it, it'll be like semi-blunt. Anything you pull straight down and cut will be completely blunt. But this is, like I said, this is hair cutting in a nutshell. If you want to take every haircut ever, This is what it all comes down to, is that little simple basic principle that your simple blunt line is only a simple blunt line if it's sitting exactly where it was sitting as it was cut. anything else that it does, that's just like this great big grand world of what a haircut can be. So here's a pretty classic example of this, and it's a haircut that I recommend every haircutter, even if you're a barber, if you want to like know haircutting better, do a graduated bob and then do another one and another one. Like do a lot of graduated bobs, buy a bunch of mannequin heads and wreck them. I feel like when you grasp this haircut, you understand so much more about haircutting just as a whole. Generally speaking, if I know that I want to cut a bob, I would want to pull everything straight down here to about, well, let's just say this line there. If I pull everything straight down and cut it to that line, well, right now it's popping up because this top hair is curling, but if they're all the same length there, we don't have graduation, we don't have layers, it doesn't stack up there. However, you see this 45-degree line here, roughly 45 degrees? I know that if I pull the hair out to roughly 45 degrees, I know that if I pull this hair out to roughly 45 degrees here and cut it at this angle here, I can end up with a graduated bob. It's hard to do. So if I take this and comb it down, we'll see that the hair stacks up here. It's got graduation. So if this hair falls here now, we can see that it layers, it graduates. It builds up our cute little stacked bob here. You can see the shape, hopefully in the video, but I'll just draw it out here if you don't. See, it kind of gives us that number. Or let's say you want to cut a very soft, very layered haircut, which is like super popular right now, like the crazy layers. It all starts with blunt lines. Everything is blunt lines, just moved away from where they're cut. You might see something like this, and I'm kind of new to this haircut, but from what I understand, this is how I've been approaching it. You pull the hair up in this way and up in this way, and you cut these angles, and even if you start with blunt lines, the end result is, well, sitting funny here, but you'll roughly have one of those cute little shag haircuts that are all the rage. Okay, maybe that last demo wasn't the clearest with this yarn situation here, but the point still is the same point that I've been beating this whole video, which is a haircut is not like take 2 inches off. It can be that. If you're getting a haircut where the cut is happening in the exact same place the hair is either falling naturally or being styled, if you're spiking your hair up and you say, hey, my spikes are 1 inch too tall, take 1 inch off, and they pull the hair straight up and they cut it 1 inch down, that makes sense. But if you're wearing your hair in most haircuts and you say, hey, take 1 inch off, that doesn't really tell us a lot. Like I mean, I get it, it's a piece of the puzzle, but what we think when you say take 1 inch off is we go and we think through all of these angles and things, and we go, how does 1 inch off change this? Will it still work? Will the angles I need still be available if I take 1 inch off? And so sometimes when you want us to do something with your hair and we say, no, we can't do that, it's because these angles, they don't match up. They won't work for the given situation. And haircutters, if there are haircutters watching this, I bought this yarn thinking like, oh, this is just gonna be a quick, simple little demo. And as I was playing with this little setup, just testing, I didn't test this last one, the shag situation, didn't test that before recording. But when I was testing like the little bob demo thing, it's not that I learned a lot, it's that I relearned something I already knew. I mean, the basic fundamentals are the fundamentals for a reason. And it's so easy for us to go to work every day in the salon and do haircuts just off of muscle memory without rethinking through the simple basics of, well, why am I pulling the hair here instead of here? If I can leave any advice for any barbers or hairstylists, haircutting is very complicated, but it also isn't. It also boils down to some really, really basic fundamentals. And it's like, every so often you got to go check in on those fundamentals and it'll blow your mind. Like things that you think you know, things that you do know, not even just think you know, things you actually know, you put them way in the back of your mind like the memory bank, and then you don't revisit them. And when you relearn them, you will be shocked at how helpful it is. So I highly recommend, if you're a hair cutter and you want to learn more of this stuff, check out Matt Beck at Free Salon Education. He's amazing. Check out DJ Muldoon. He is amazing. Check out Ben Brown on YouTube. He's amazing. Those guys all teach this stuff much better than I do. I just try to keep everything sort of surface level and hopefully entertaining, and I try to make people think. I don't try to do the deep education stuff because I'm not really the guy to do that. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you had fun, because I did.